meeting to order. Okay, welcome everyone. And I would like to welcome our council person. I believe we have Councilwoman Sawyer on. I don't see anybody else. So with that, first I'd like to thank Susan for sending the minutes. And I'll just ask if anybody has any comments to the minutes or a motion to approve getting those into our records. Anybody? Wave a hand.
No comments. I'll make a motion to approve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Everybody, can I have a second? And then just a raise of hand. Thank you very much. So raise your hand. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move right along then. And Councilwoman Sawyer, thank you for being here. I know you've got another meeting tonight, so I'd like to ask you to just tell us what you've been up to. Thank you for joining us, as you always try to do. And we'll hear a little bit from Councilwoman Sawyer and anybody else who shows up on council updates.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, Lou. It's great to see everybody. And Logan will be here. I apologize, I have to run out, but he'll be here for the meeting. So if you have any questions, he is your contact for follow-up. And there are a couple of things happening in the Cherry Creek neighborhood that I just wanted to touch base on. In the Cherry Creek East neighborhood. So one of the things that's coming up is that there is going to be a steering committee put together to look at 15 miles of the Spear, Leetsdale, Alameda corridor that's coming up. So wanted to flag that for everyone. It will look at the BRT and kind of start that project. So I think there's going to be about 5 meetings over the course of the next year to talk about it. It's a pretty long project that's from Lakewood basically all the way to Aurora. So it's a big project with a lot going on, but wanted to flag that for everyone as it's going to be starting relatively soon here. So that's an important one for you all. And then wanted to also let you know, we have talked to Dottie about replacing the signage, the wayfinding signage for the area for all of the Cherry Creek shopping area, basically. And they have agreed to do it, and there is budget associated with it. So yay, we've checked all the boxes. So Lou and Richard, I believe you both got an email from my office that just says who the contact is. They have to they want to do a little bit of redesign, and we have the opportunity to give them input on that. It's got to be within the kind of confines of ability of Dottie to print the signs. So what our sign house can do. So there's not going to be, extra materials or anything like that that are going to be an option. But just flagging that for both of you, because those signs that are up there now are the wayfinding signs that exist are pretty beat up and need to be replaced. And Dottie recognizes that, and they're going to go ahead and do it. So that's great news. Logan, there was something else. What was it? I can't remember.
Yes, there was, but I can't remember either. Okay. Hold on, let me look through my email.
Well, if you think about it, let me know what it was, or you can fill in the gaps in the meantime. But we are working hard for you guys downtown. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. I'm sure you've all seen that I have continued to vote no on the mayor's emergency declaration. I have a lot of concerns around transparency, particularly when it comes to the locations of potential sites, the finances and budgets that are associated with this project, and a number of different consequences, including staff time issues that are going to result from people being in the Emergency Operations Center. So, and please feel free to reach out if you have questions about that. I'm not sure I have answers for you, which is why I keep voting no, because I think we deserve answers before we just blanket agree to this emergency order. So I think that's about all that's going on down in our office. It's been really busy the last few days. Lou, I see you raising your hand. Do you have a question for me?
I do. What's so you mentioned the Spear Leetsdale Steering Committee. that includes BRT. And I guess I was surprised to hear that, since that really should have been a sort of centered topic of Denver moves Cherry Creek. So who's setting that up, and why is this sort of coming in at this time?
Yeah, I don't know. Paige, you just came off mute, so you might be able to add more information. We got an email in our office about from Dottie about it earlier this week. It's being put together by Dr. Cog, not by the city, because it covers multiple cities. So that's the information I have on it at this time. I have provided them a list of stakeholders along our corridor, including neighborhood associations, business improvement districts, and all, transportation solutions, et cetera. So they have all of the contact information and need to provide that to Dr. Cog for them to kind of decide on next steps. Like I said, it's a huge corridor. It's almost 15 miles. So that's the information I have on it at this time. And I've asked them to include, Cherry Creek, whether it's the steering committee or whether it's the neighborhood association, transportation solutions, et cetera. Stuart, you just came off mute too. I'm going to let you guys talk. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm very happy to hear this. I knew it was in the works somewhere, but to actually hear it moving forward is a really big deal for us, folks. I thought this would be 5 years from now.
Group, I wanted to jump in. I believe this is the Dr. Cog Alameda BRT study, which includes the University First Alameda alignment to get around Cherry Creek Trail, but it's mainly Alameda alignment, not the Spearleaf-Stale, not the diagonal Spearleaf-Stale corridor that you might be thinking of.
But there's a kind of a hook that goes through here that kind of touches the Cherry Creek Steering Committee area, and it also
absolutely
Cherry Creek East, and it so there's a lot of stakeholders that need to kind of be included there. And I sent an email to Maggie kind of listing all of that out and asking a bunch of follow-up questions. She said she would pass it along to Dr. Cog and get back to me, and we're still waiting for a response on that. So unfortunately, I don't have any other details except that it is happening and that it is a Dr. Cog project. So I will let you know when I know more for sure.
Great, thank you.
This
Okay,
is, excuse me, if this is an Alameda corridor, then all of the neighborhoods south of Cherry Creek should be involved. Every one of them.
Yeah, Alan, really appreciate that. The neighborhood south of Cherry Creek
involves an Alameda bridge, and that's a huge source of contention.
Yeah, and that's good to know. That's not District 5, that's District 6. I know Councilmember Cashman's office has also gotten an email from Dottie saying, hey, this is happening. Yeah, so that would be a question for Councilmember Cashman's office in terms of, what information he provided to Dottie to pass along to Dr. Cog for the steering committee as well. But it is, in terms of the neighborhoods that it will touch and affect when it comes to the Cherry Creek Steering Committee, there are a number of them, especially, Cherry Creek North and Cherry Creek East. So, and not necessarily the bid, but certainly we've got representatives from every one of those areas on the steering committee here. So, that was one of the questions I asked is who do you want to add? In terms of the neighborhoods to the south, that is something to definitely reach out to Councilmember Cashman's office about.
Alan, I asked Dottie this question about the bridge because it's so controversial. Right now, it's not being considered. Paige, correct me if I'm wrong. They plan to go from Alameda up University to First and then back down and not create the bridge. So at least that's what I heard lately.
Yeah, that's right, Stuart. That's what we're considering.
Well, Councilwoman, thank you very much for being here. I always invite Councilman Cashman. I don't see him here, but maybe we will reach out to him and see if there are some updates when we know more about this. And we will, we'll work together to make sure we have some more information. Of course, in our presentation today, we'll ask Paige and her team to maybe touch on that a little more specifically, so we know exactly what route it is that is being identified as part of that study corridor. So thank you again for being here. And with that, I guess I would ask for update from the bid. Richard, I assume you're giving us that report.
I sure will. Yeah. Really for this group, what we have going on right now, just wrapping up the year, we have about 8 more large landscaping projects that we'll be finishing up this year, planting into September. We're going to go in with more bulbs to make sure we have a beautiful spring. We're already starting on our holiday preparations now. We did wrap up that LED light project, and we're going to do additional lighting next year out on Fillmore, we've decided, pending final budget approval. And then just for this group, I know this conflicts a bit with the neighborhood association. They have an event on the 14th, but just so everybody does know, the Denver Police Foundation is doing an event out on Fillmore Plaza. It'll be Thursday, September 14th at 5 o'clock. And this is just a Back the Blue barbecue. Halliburton's bringing in a big semi truck that's a barbecue, and it's going to be a fundraiser to support buying rifle-rated body armor for our Denver police officers. So if anybody's able to come, we'd enjoy seeing you there, and just to raise money for a great institution and hopefully get our cops some rifle-rated body armor. And that is it from North.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to the topic this evening. I think I sent an update to all of you. We're going to try to wrap this up at 6 o'clock. So I'm hopeful that we can get through this. If not, I will be walking my computer outside close to the door of this library at Gilpin County, where I'm getting internet service. But I would like to welcome the Dottie team from Denver Moves, and Paige, I believe you're going to be heading this up, so I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lou. Thanks everybody for having us. Just a quick round of introductions. I think you all know me by now, Paige Colton. I'm a planner with Dottie and leading the Denver Moves Cherry Creek project. Carly, do you want to introduce yourself, and then Sam and Kayla as well?
Sure. My name is Carly Seith with Fair and Piers. I'm the project manager on the consultant side. Fair and Piers is leading Denver Moves Cherry Creek with a team of other great consultants as well.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sam Piper. I'm a multimodal planning supervisor with Dottie, and I've been supporting Paige behind the scenes on this project and effort. We're just really excited today to present an update about the project and looking forward to hearing from all of you about the information we're sharing this evening. So thank you for having us present to you today. And then I'll pass it over to Kayla.
Hey everyone, my name is Kayla. I'm a planner on the bike ped team with Paige and Sam at Dottie, and I've been working with Paige pretty closely on Denver Moves Cherry Creek.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody. Okay, so diving into our presentation here. So what we're going to talk about today, we'll just give a quick project process recap. I know a lot of you are on our Denver Moves Cherry Creek steering committee, so bear with us as we have some duplicative items from our meeting that we had in June, but really wanted to get the word out to everybody here. We're going to do a brief recap of the outreach process that we did last January and February when we last came to this group to present. We'll be talking about the results of our modeling effort that we did to kind of understand the future of transportation in Cherry Creek. And then we're going to get into a little bit of detail on our high priority project recommendations and high priority intersection improvement concepts. So our internal stakeholder group has seen the high priority project recommendations, but hasn't seen the intersection improvement concepts. So curious to get additional thoughts. And then we'll be talking about what's next for the project. Okay, so just a reminder of what Denver Moves Cherry Creek is and what we're working towards. At the end of the project, which will be at the end of this year, we're looking to have a project and policy list that contains short, medium, and long-term recommendations to help us achieve the vision that we have for mobility in Cherry Creek. We're also going to have expanded concept ideas for these high priority projects and pedestrian crossing improvement projects, which we'll get into a little bit later. And then for every project, regardless of whether we call them a high priority project or they're just on our general list of big projects and policies, we'll detail out how they fall in the citywide prioritization scheme of all the projects we have identified. We'll be identifying phasing for those, cost estimates, and who we look to be partners with us to implement those. And then we also have this additional pot of money, which we've talked about before. And at the end of this process, we will have identified where we'd like to spend that money. So just visually what that looks like. We started last summer understanding what the conditions are in terms of travel in and around Cherry Creek, developed a state of the system report, worked with the community and you all to understand what challenges existed, made sure we incorporated all the previous planning efforts that have happened since before this project came online. Then in early 2023, we came back and had a list of draft projects and policies that we wanted to recommend, got the community's feedback on that. And in the meantime, we've selected those high priority projects, ran our modeling exercise, and now we're coming back to the community with our final list of projects and policies, those high priority project concepts, and to make sure everything is no red flags about any projects or policies, that we can come to agreement on the path forward, both short term and longer term. Okay, so just a recap of the outreach that we did in January and February and what the results were. We had over 1,200 points of engagement in the Cherry Creek area, which is great. So with visitors, with community members, with people who work in the area. We held a virtual public meeting, had a number of small group discussions and presentations like the one we gave to you all. And then we had the interactive project map and online survey, which had a ton of engagement and gave us a lot of great feedback about what people prioritize or what they feel is really important and any kind of edits or modifications we should be making to our recommendations. So how we're going to incorporate this feedback, and we've already been doing this, incorporating it in. So we're using that feedback to help us refine where the projects are located and kind of their scope. It'll inform where those projects, how those projects are prioritized both within Cherry Creek and within the citywide list of projects and policies that Dottie is pursuing. And then it's also informing details on those high priority projects that we'll get to in a bit. So some key highlights from that outreach. We had our top upvoted projects were First Avenue to Steele, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, so from University to Bayard. We heard a lot about the First Avenue Cherry Creek Trail improvements, so that's from Downing to University, that part that runs along First Avenue. Also heard a lot about First Avenue, Spear, and Downing Street intersection. So that's the intersection just to the west of that trail connection where a bunch of roads come together and the Cherry Creek Trail kind of pops up onto the road in that location as well. We also heard a lot of interest in the Spear Leasdale bus rapid transit project, and in general, just all the multimodal improvements that are needed on Colorado Boulevard in our city area. Okay, passing on, to Carly to talk about our modeling exercise.
Great, thanks, Paige. So we did an exercise to think about what is the future going to look like in Cherry Creek. Obviously, no one can predict what it will look like. We have historic trends that we can extrapolate out. We have kind of current travel patterns and land use and development patterns that we can consider. But we want to make sure that regardless of what direction the future takes, that we are creating a project list that will create a resilient and safe, comfortable Cherry Creek. So meeting all of our vision and goals, regardless of what we see happening with development, land use, and transportation technology. So we did this screening process. We first started by creating 3 different scenarios. The first scenario is our baseline. So all of these scenarios are looking at the future. They're thinking about 2050. The status quo one is if we take those current travel patterns and land use patterns we're seeing today and we just draw that line out, what can we expect to see in the future? And then we created 2 additional scenarios kind of on either bookend of that. What if we have a Cherry Creek even more dense? So we consider all the development that's planned for and happening today, and we have even more development than that. So increasing that rate of population and employment density. And then the other scenario is thinking about a scenario where we've got growth in Cherry Creek, but we also have growth in other neighboring hubs as well. So we see a more distributed growth model rather than downtown and Cherry Creek being these 2 major hubs that just continue to grow at a faster rate. We're seeing these other smaller neighborhood hubs grow as well. So we modeled these 3 scenarios in the travel demand model that was used for Denver Moves Everyone, or the citywide plan as well, and started to look at what are the performance measures or those outcomes and how do they change in each of the scenarios. So we looked at choices. How many different options do people have to travel? What are those multimodal investments? What are the results of those investments we're seeing in walking, biking, and transit in these different scenarios? So that was one of the other levers we looked at. Is in the more dense Cherry Creek scenario, we acknowledge that there's an increase in demand for travel and therefore an increased investment from Dottie in transit investments, because we have a higher demand for ridership, and thus we can support greater economies of scale to support higher frequency transit and or more transit routes, and more walking and biking infrastructure, because we see a higher demand for these active transportation modes as well. So what we're really seeing is in a higher growth scenario, this support, demand, and investment for multimodal transportation options. So we looked at kind of going down the list: demand for travel, which changes intuitively with these different scenarios; congestion, density and growth; investment in technology, which is part of the narrative of each of the scenarios, that when we have a higher density Cherry Creek, we have less technology because folks are going to the office more in this scenario. That's why we're going to in-person brick and mortar stores, versus the distributed growth model. We're seeing more work from home and more online shopping, thus kind of the less growth in the hub of Cherry Creek. So with that, when we modeled each of those different scenarios, we just pulled out some of the major points and the major takeaways, and mode shift is the big one here. So the orange dot is the higher density Cherry Creek, versus the blue dot at the end of each bar is the distributed growth. So we're seeing the investment in multimodal transportation options result in a greater shift to these other modes, but in the distributed growth scenario, because of lower demand for travel, we see higher transit ridership, higher bike mode share. So ultimately, the status quo scenario is even in our area of congestion, but when we have higher density, we're seeing a little bit more congestion than the status quo, but not by a significant amount due to these investments in other modes. Sorry, this is complicated stuff. Framing it in a way that makes sense is definitely happy to answer any questions or reframe that, but wanted to kind of share what the model said. This is really high level. It helped inform the project list, but want to kind of emphasize that it is forecasting out in the future. So just helps us kind of create this bookends of options that we're making sure to plan within. But are there any questions on the scenarios or the results of the model? Okay, well, we can happy to go back to that too as we get into the priority recommendations. Great, so we'll jump into high priority projects next.
Okay, thanks, Carly. So out of that big list of projects and policies that we had shared with you all in January and February of this year, we winnowed down that big list into a smaller set of projects that we use the following criteria to identify. So we chose projects that were high community priorities, and we determined that based on the outreach that we did in the winter of this year and the outreach that we did last summer when people identified the needs and challenges they were experiencing. We also made sure they met the project goals. So our stakeholder group identified goals that they wanted to work towards for mobility in Cherry Creek. And we also have our citywide vision and goals for what mobility in the city should look like. So we made sure they met those goals. We also looked at projects that we had an opportunity to move forward in the near term. So that could be through development, that could be through another agency, such as DRCOG leading the Alameda BRT study. We knew that we had to kind of get our vision in for these projects before they move forward. And so we really wanted to kind of dive into those projects now with you all, the community, and make sure we're moving forward in the right direction. We also chose projects that serve the Cherry Creek neighborhood specifically, since the project is focused, and we've heard from you all, really want to focus on the Cherry Creek neighborhood, even though our study area is much larger than that. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure we had projects that we knew would balance all of our multimodal needs. So we chose projects that represented different modes. So for each of these high priority projects, we're developing some sort of conceptual idea or plan for. So you either have a concept design, a project fact sheet, or an alternative summary. So we've done some analysis, we're validating that with you all, and that's going to be the product for those. And then again, yeah, hoping to advance those through upcoming work through partner organizations, with the organizations here, and with development. Okay, so this is the list of high priority projects. I'm just going to walk through them briefly. We have a map of them, and then Carla's going to go into detail on each one. So for intersection improvements, we have First Avenue and Steel Street, First Ave and Colorado Boulevard. We have transit enhancements, so transit service buy-up, and then our bus rapid transit and speed and reliability corridors. So those are two different types of investments we'd like to make in transit corridors. We have fact sheets for each of those. In terms of bike facilities, we have the Clayton Street Neighborhood Bikeway. For trail enhancements, we have the Cherry Creek Trail between Downey and University. And then lastly, we heard a ton about First Avenue and how it is very important and also a big barrier in the community. So considering that segment as a whole and making sure we have a clear vision for what that'll look like in the future. So this is a map of those projects. The green are the transit improvements. The blue is the bikeway. The red is the trail enhancements. And then the purple is really that First Ave critical connection.
Great. So I'll jump into the description for each of those high priority projects. The first being First and Steel. So this is a recommendation some of you may remember from 2014. That was a great recommendation. At the time, there was a lot of construction going on in Cherry Creek, which was the reason that this idea was paused. So we went back to the drawing board, we collected updated data, performed an updated operational analysis, made sure that the design concept was still in line with Dottie's design manual and standards, as well as best practice. So the only update we have from the 2014 design is to add a marked crosswalk here to reduce out of direction travel for pedestrians. But generally the concept is very similar. So this is that intersection that's really funky, multi-leg crossing, where you've got Steel and First here, and there's just a misalignment of the legs of the intersection. So the proposal here is to align a traditional four-legged crossing. It also adds pedestrian refuge islands, and adds, you can see faint in the background, just the number of different legs of the crossing here, and it reduces those for pedestrians. It actually also, when you look at the results of our operational analysis, it reduces the seconds of delay for vehicles as well, and it makes the intersection much more intuitive, so it's a benefit for all modes. The next crossing recommendation is first in Colorado. Of course, we've got BRT coming, so want to prepare and anticipate that, but also not get in the way of future study of Colorado. That's imminent and upcoming, so really wanted to set that project up for success. So lots of different recommendations here, but the primary goal is to improve pedestrian safety and intuitiveness for people driving. As well as gateway treatment. So this is, as you start to enter Cherry Creek as you're traveling west at this intersection, so really adding greenery, gateway opportunities, acknowledging future development on these corners, but also being able to leverage the investment from these future developers. We've also added pedestrian refuge island, which means we're breaking up that pedestrian crossing into 2 phases to give folks a space for refuge here. And we made small operational adjustments by adding a protected left turn, which means you can only turn left if you have a green arrow. And this means that people turning left won't be distracted looking for a gap in oncoming traffic and miss pedestrians crossing the street. So because we made an operational change here, we performed an analysis as well to make sure that this didn't add kind of undue vehicle delay. And you see it only adds a few seconds of vehicle delay with this operational change. So next on the list is this key corridor on First that goes down Steel as well. So we kind of synthesized what we're seeing changes in land use, transit, and then transportation over time. We paired our recommendations based off of these transitions in land use and transit, knowing that this area is really changing quickly. And so we want to make distinct and targeted recommendations in the short, medium, and long term, but really focusing on the short term for Denver Moves Cherry Creek. So we're able to, as Paige said, leverage development going on here and address imminent urgent safety challenges on the corridor. So we've identified different kinds of operational and geometric changes that are appropriate at different intersections, depending on the geometry of that intersection and the signalization. So I won't read this all, but just some examples that we're really focused on are signal length. So this is something we heard a lot, is that if you're looking to cross the street, you often have to wait a very long time. So reducing the length that it takes for the signal to go through its whole entire cycle, which improves the pedestrian experience. Improving the prioritization for transit vehicles. So it's called transit signal priority, which means that the signal knows when a bus is approaching, and it can make sure to optimize for buses. So really wanting to prioritize walking, biking, and transit in this area, especially on this corridor. So recommendations are in line with the values and goals that we heard from the community through this process. And then the bikeway design. So Clayton Street was the most supported bikeway from the community, in combination with the highest ranked citywide priority. So with that, it rose to the top for greater detailed design. So some of you may be familiar with the neighborhood bikeway concept on other corridors in the city, Garfield, for example. So a similar set of treatments and kind of concepts that are being conveyed here. So we have the whole plot, which you'll see at our community meeting in September if you're interested in the details, but we just called out some of the key intersections here to highlight some more significant recommendations and more significant changes. So especially at First and Clayton, with the Cherry Creek West investment in the 2-way protected bike lanes south of First, we've proposed that carrying bikes across First Avenue with a refuge in the median here, and then bringing them onto Clayton in the form of a neighborhood bikeway. So basically, we need to get bidirectional bike traffic that's on the west side to north of First and along Clayton here as well. And then some other key intersections, obviously 6th and 8th are the 2 big arterials, and you have a jog. So making sure that we're keeping bikes protected and safe and not kind of losing this low stress facility when we get to the intersection. So in each case, we've got a 2-way, basically a wide multi-use path through the jog part, and then carrying bikes, continuing bikes in the north-south direction.
And Carly, we
Oh,
have a
yeah.
hand up actually.
Oh, sorry.
No, all good, Bill.
Open.
Thank you very much. One of the questions I have for you on the Clayton Bikeway is that, we have obviously the Cherry Creek West development, which is, really intense. Okay, and probably even more than you envisioned when you started this project. And so I see a huge opportunity there to increase mobility between Cherry Creek West and Cherry Creek North. And a question for you might be that should this be a bridge actually going across first so that traffic can go underneath it and both pedestrians and bicyclists can go over the top of the bridge? I get the idea that you mentioned here, it's going to be like the Garfield intersection, correct? Am I, and I think that's fine. Then it's an improvement, but I don't think it's really enough given the intensity of traffic along that corridor. And so I'd like to see that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Bill, thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate that. Grade separated crossings are something that we consider through the process. And so all the different levels of investment and comfort. So just thinking through and acknowledging the cost when we thought through that option, we decided to pursue the at-grade crossing option, just acknowledging the dollar amount associated with the grade separated crossing and the right of way required as well.
I understand. Yeah, but money is a big thing.
And Bill, to your point about
Mhm.
Cherry Creek West, so they have committed to putting in a two-way bikeway on the west side of, or on the east side of their property from the Cherry Creek up to that intersection, which is really exciting. So, gets us part of the way. Then the question, and love to hear more comments about this, is how do we get people then north, up both into Cherry Creek North and the neighborhood to the north of that.
I would like to say that since we're limited on time today, I'd really like to get through the presentation. And then there'll be other opportunities for public comment. And as I've said before, please send any comments directly to me. I would like to take Stuart's question, and I put one in the chat, or if you have questions, put them in the chat, because if we don't get to them today because we're short on time, we'll be able to get those questions to the team. And I pointed out, and then I'd like Stuart to respond, but Stuart, you probably had some of the same questions. So please give it a question, and then let's get back to the full presentation.
Thank you, Lou. I really like what I see, folks. This is good work that you're doing. My one concern has always been separating bikes from pedestrians. And I know human behavior, and the cyclists will continue along First Avenue between University and Clayton, especially with the Equinox gym on the other side of the street. I doubt very much that the cyclists will go all the way down to the trail and then up Clayton to that location. And in talking with Amy, they have no plans for accommodating bikes on the north side of their property. They're going to come anyway, and that's my concern.
Yeah, great comment, Stuart. And yeah, how do we make that east-west connection? And more recently, Stuart, maybe then you've been asking east-west to consider the implications of a two-way cycle track on the north side of their property, and then also accommodating a bus rapid transit stop as well. So we're definitely talking with them about that, and they are including that in their mobility study, and figuring out how that possible connection would work. But all great comments. We'll also have time, so maybe, let us get through these high priority projects, and then we'll have hopefully time for more questions and comments at the end.
These are great thoughts, though. I appreciate the feedback. And as Lou said, keep typing them in the chat too, because you have others. So this is that section of Cherry Creek Trail where it really narrows, and it's right adjacent to travel lanes on First. And again, was one of the highest mentioned areas of concern in public feedback. So this is between Downing and University. So we came up with 8 different options. They fall within 3 different categories of how to address this. This is obviously really tricky one. So got creative here, and we're throwing out the full gamut of options, really thinking of everything that's available available to us. So first is there is a small amount of shoulder between the Cherry Creek Trail and the travel lane that's painted. It's an option to expand to widen the trail into that space. I want to say it's 4 feet, but the text is small. So somewhere between 2 and 4 feet of shoulder to widen the trail into the travel lane. The next option, I guess we're moving here. The next option is to shift the trail to the south into Denver Country Club's property. So their stakeholder we're obviously having lots of conversations with and have been at the table through the process. These are very early conversations, and just wanting to throw out this option out there as we continue to talk to them. The next option is to remove a travel lane in the eastbound direction to provide that extra width to add a buffer and to widen the trail. And the next option is pretty similar to the first one, which is widening the Cherry Creek Trail into the shoulder width, but it's through a temporary treatment. So something that would just kind of add a cap to add some extra width into that space without moving the curb and the expense that's associated with moving curb and gutter. The next option is to take width from the median, so narrowing the median, which would give us the space to add a buffer and widen that multi-use path. Next is to add a bike facility in the median, so using that width in the median to have a two-way separated bike facility. And then lastly, this is just something to study and is high level, obviously, at this point, which is to shift the trail to the north side of the street entirely, where we have more width for a wider multi-use path with a buffer. So next set of recommendations are about transit. So this one is called Transit Service Buy-Up, which is a medium to long-term recommendation, which means increase investment through RTD in their current fixed route system to increase the frequency or hours of operation of existing routes. So I'm just going to provide a few slides on background of how we identified this recommendation. So the first was to do an assessment of what is the coverage of transit currently in the area. So using best practice of a quarter-mile walk shed of every bus stop in Cherry Creek, how well do we cover the study area? You can see we cover the study area pretty well. There's a few locations that are a little bit more than a quarter mile of a bus stop, but generally everyone who lives, works, or is trying to access an area of Cherry Creek is within a short walk of a bus stop. Then we looked at frequency, and this is really where transit becomes less reliable and convenient. So you can see yellow is 60-minute frequency. So, and this is in the peak hour. So in the off-peak hour, we have even lower frequencies, but we're seeing that in the core part of Cherry Creek, frequency can be an hour, sometimes 30 minutes. There are a few routes that are 15 minutes in the peak hour, but if we started to break out those 50-minute frequency routes and looked at the coverage of those, it is a much smaller area of Cherry Creek that's within a short walk of a 15-minute bus, which is the level of frequency that is convenient. We would expect, to be a reliable transportation option for riders. And then we looked at so if we are to invest in increasing the frequency of routes, which ones should we invest in? So one of the criteria that's going to be really important for DOTI investment, and as we think of where do we want to increase access, given that a lot of employers are coming to Cherry Creek, it's in areas of high inequity in the city. So the yellow areas are those in areas of high inequity using the city's index that they've created. And then we calculated the percent of bus stops that go through Cherry Creek that have stops within areas of high inequity. So you can see Route 3, 46, 24, those are the 3 routes that provide the most access between Cherry Creek and a high inequity area of the city. So all of those things considered, we compared the system optimization plan, which is called RTD's SOP, so future plans for investment that RTD is already going to make. And then we looked at how can Denver Moves, Cherry Creek, and DOTI supplement those with increased frequency. Which route should we recommend increased frequency? Is it during the peak hour frequency needs to increase, or maybe it's different hours of the day? So we also looked at, if you remember from existing conditions, locus data or travel patterns. We looked at what time are people traveling from different parts of the city. All of that came together to create this list of recommendations to help transit in the medium to long term. And then the other transit piece is BRTs. So Alameda is coming down the pipeline. In the short term, Colorado as well. First Beerley is still not far behind that. So really exciting that the 3 BRT corridors that travel within Cherry Creek, this is still a long term away, but the planning process is moving along with each of these 3 BRT corridors. So we wanted to do with Denver Moves Cherry Creek is make sure we're setting these projects up for success. So what are these catalyst projects that are going to provide first and last mile access to BRTs, going to provide the enhancements to make sure that people can access BRTs comfortably, or even interim recommendations to provide enhanced transit service until BRTs are coming online. So we made a fact sheet for each of the BRT corridors, as well as speed and reliability corridors, where maybe there isn't a dedicated transit lane, but there are optimization investments happening at intersections or approaches to intersections such as Q jumps. So we've kind of brought all of the Denver Moves Cherry Creek ingredients together to help kind of set up BRTs for success. So that was a lot of information. We did add 5 more crossing locations that Paige will introduce and we'll talk about, and then we'll open things up for a couple of minutes of questions.
Yeah, so we have scoped to improve pedestrian crossings in Cherry Creek, and we ended up choosing certain intersections that we knew had high crashes, higher bike ped crashes. So in general, we know have safety issues. These are also intersections that we heard from the community are high priority. And then we know they're higher priority within our citywide prioritization process as well. So we use all those considerations to choose these intersections. So we've got the Downing First Spear intersection to the west that I mentioned was one of the top community concern intersections as well through our second round of outreach that we heard. We've got University and First Avenue, which we know is a huge intersection and just really challenging to cross as a bicyclist and pedestrian. We also have an opportunity with Cherry Creek West to be making some improvements to that intersection, which is exciting. We've got Steele and Ellsworth and Steele and Bayard, both of which we have safety concerns at, and we have a development coming in that can help us maybe make some of these changes. And then lastly, we have the intersection of Cherry Creek North Drive and Alameda, where the Cherry Creek Trail comes up and is a bit of a wonky intersection. They're all a little bit odd and not your typical square intersection.
Thanks, Paige. So at each of these different intersections, we recommended operational and or geometric changes. So pretty similar to what I talked about at First in Colorado or First in Steele. And so don't want to bog down in the details, but higher level, the kinds of things that we're looking at here. So first we looked at crash patterns. How many crashes are happening? What are they happening at a certain leg more than other legs? And then what is the turning movements or the movement of the vehicle that tends to be involved in the crash? So a really good example is northbound vehicles on Downing. There are a lot of right hook turns or vehicles turning right from going northbound on Downing that are hitting pedestrians, crossing from that kind of parkway treatment, trying to access the trail. So the city recently implemented a leading pedestrian interval, which means that pedestrians get to go out to the intersection first to increase their visibility. We are recommending potentially considering no right turn on red if we haven't seen a reduction in crashes because of that leading pedestrian interval. So no right turn on red is a really great way to help reduce that kind of right hook turn kind of collision type. So that's an example of a recommendation, an analysis we took and a recommendation that addressed the crash patterns that we're seeing. Other things that we're recommending are tightening curb radii. So not an operational impact, but if we have a lot of those right hook turns, then we're probably seeing quick, fast moving right turning vehicles. If we tighten up that curb radii, so make it more acute of an angle, then it slows down vehicles and increases the visibility of pedestrians and reduces that crossing distance. We talked a lot about pedestrian refuge islands and some of those high priority recommendations as well. Widening sidewalks is especially along Steel, so that Steel and Ellsworth and Steel and Bayard intersection, those bollards came up a lot, which really narrows the space for people walking and biking. So opportunities to increase that, especially when you've got bidirectional travel. And as Stuart mentioned, people walking and biking in both directions want to create enough space. And then raised crosswalks, which is when you've got that free right or that island, especially on I think this is at University and First, it's an opportunity to add a traffic calming device and prioritizes the pedestrian. So there's a long list of different treatments, but this is a summary of the kinds of things that we are recommending at these locations.
And before we jump into questions here, yeah, Lou reminded me in the comments. So we had the high priority projects, which were ran by our stakeholder group in June. These pedestrian crossing locations are new, so we wanted to separate them out and make sure you all had your eyes on the full set of projects.
Okay, I know that there are some other questions that were in the chat. One of which was I raised in terms of the fact that Clayton is a private street, and based on the developer proposals, those are going to be valet loading, extensive valet loading on each side. And I know that there had been a discussion about moving that at least up to 4 to the Detroit Street side, because there's not as much use. You've got condominiums and you've got the backside of the office building. So you really don't have the same street use, and it's a public street instead of a private street. Why is that not being considered?
Yeah, Lou, great question. And I also should have mentioned, yeah, all the comments we received from you all in June are being incorporated in. We just wanted to present the original idea to hear what we heard from this group.
So there is a possibility that bike lane would
so
be
we definitely want to continue. Yeah, Lou, definitely a possibility. We're still leaning towards Clayton in a couple of respects. One, we're working with the Clayton North development to understand what their site will bring and what uses they have on that street. So we want to leave things open right now to see what we can work with them to develop. So that's kind of still TBD. They're going through a large development review process on that project. And then we also had a conversation with Hotel Clio to understand more about their valet and how it functions, because we definitely heard those valet concerns that you had. So we want to make sure we can make operational adjustments before we decide to totally shift over to Detroit. So definitely still having conversations, and nothing is set in stone right now for a recommendation. So thanks for raising that, Lou.
Yeah, it's just time should be spent now, because even with the one valet between first and second, and then second and third with the Clayton valet, it's very hard because cars are stopping all the time and doors are opening. So it's hard enough in a car. I certainly wouldn't want to do it on a bike. Stuart?
Yes, first, I'd like to make the case for improving the pedestrian element at Fillmore and First. And the reason is two-part. First, as many may remember, it had a brick treatment, and those bricks were flying up and hitting the store's window. So they poured concrete in there temporarily. And so I see it as an incomplete intersection. The other thing that creates a hazard, and this is something that we talked with RTD about, and something that Jeremy was very concerned about, is that the way that the bus stops, it pulls all the way up to the pedestrian lane. And so what happens, people get off the bus, they turn left, they think they can cross in the pedestrian lane, but then those next two lanes can't see people. And according to Jeremy and his staff, it happens way too frequently that people get off the bus and dart across the street. So we tried to move the bus stop, but it was greater than 2%, as I mentioned previously. I'd also like to make the case for having no right turn red on Downing until it gets rebuilt. It's not just crossing the intersection. It's also the fact that for whatever reason, cyclists join the pathway there and they take that little tiny third of a sidewalk and try to ride it. I have watched, bikes trying to get around, pedestrians waiting for the bus, and it's just kind of chaotic. So until it's rebuilt, that's what I recommend. And last comment, I'm trying to be really fast. Bill, I understand your idea on the overpass, but they fail miserably in Colorado. We can't get people to use them. And time again, they go up at high expense and people just don't want to climb up the stairs and then climb down the stairs on the other side. Or is that Bill Tanner? I'm sorry.
It's Bill Tanner, but you also have to worry about the fact that with the ADA, you'd have to have a way for wheelchairs to access that. And frankly, it just is the issues balloon.
Yeah, okay, I got it. Thank you for addressing the question and considering it.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Good comments. Yeah, any other comments or questions?
I would encourage everybody to please think about this. I'm walking outside right now and I'm still able to get some connectivity. So I'm happy to keep this going for a little bit as long as I do. But I would encourage people to take a look at this. This is being recorded. It will be up on our website within 48 hours at the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association YouTube channel. So you are able to watch this again. Focus on it a little more. I know it is a lot of information and it may not necessarily catch up with where some of us thought we were going on certain things. And certainly there's still opportunity for input and more questions. So please look at this carefully. Please do send your questions. You can send them to me and I will continue to keep a list. I do get, I will pull the questions on chat to the extent that they have not been addressed. And then we'll just keep going. But I think this is real progress. I agree with Stuart. There's a lot to talk about. I think that the segment between University and Downing, as far as that bike path, there are lots of conversations to be had. There's a lot of options there. I can't imagine that the city would have enough money to condemn a piece of land from the Denver Country Club, but we'll see. It also seems, because I've walked that a lot, that's a lot of grass and very uncomfortable for somebody to be mowing grass, which is also not a green use. So there's lots of possibilities and we should have input, but now that we can really see some of these priority projects, it's time to take those back, think about them, and then let's get some real considered and well thought out questions and input, frankly.
Yes, thank you, Lou. I couldn't have said it better myself. And I'm definitely providing this slide deck to Susan and Lou. So it'll be sent out. Feel free to send up markups to the PDF or just questions or comments in an email. I just want to briefly touch on, we have a couple input opportunities coming up. We're going to be tabling, which is having a table and probably some donuts at Milwaukee and 3rd Avenue in September. We have a public meeting the evening of September 19th. We'll be getting a broader perspective from the community and soliciting input on these projects. Oh, I just lost my light here. And then again, we're wrapping up that final implementation plan by the end of 2024. And we will have identified how we're going to spend that extra pot of money. And then kind of after that will be the implementation of spending that money. So I think we have on our project team a couple of babysitters who are leaving. So we do need to head out, but really appreciate everyone's thoughts and time. And I'll make sure Lou sends out our project email list or email address that you all can absolutely reach out to us.
And thank you and your team again for presenting to us. This is a lot of really good, solid information that we can now go back and frankly talk about and think about as a team and subgroups. And we really appreciate all your work. So thank you. And members of the steering committee, thank you for attending. Again, this will be recorded. It will be up on our the Cherry Creek North YouTube channel, so you can find it there. It'll be linked on the Cherry Creek North Neighborhood Association website as well. And that will be under the update for Denver Moves on the website, where I will also get these slide deck images posted so that you can look at those in more detail. It sometimes it's a little hard to see on the screen. So again, thank you all for being here. And I hope you all have a great rest of the evening.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
having us. Have a good night.
Bye.